And Morgan is back in Richmond today, and that means it's time to film another Good People Beer Club.
Yep. Came down just for a few days. Got a few things to take care of Richmond, so why not film an episode of the Good People Beer Club while I'm in town? It's good to be back in the studio.
The studio meaning my apartment. Our old apartment, but now my apartment.
Yeah.
Sorry, buddy. But anyways, I'm Taylor Shoemaker.
I'm Morgan Snyder.
And I'm Jonathan Tolbert.
And we are here today with another good old head-to-head, and we're doing some barrel-aged beers today.
Yep. And even more specific, we're doing Virginia local beers, which is very exciting. We're starting off today with the Blue Mountain Barrel House series. We're doing the Mandolin, which is a golden style Belgian beer. And then we're going to follow that up with the Hardywood Parks Bourbon Barrel Series, Bourbon Dipper.
The Bourbon Dipper.
Or Diaper.
The Diaper. The Bourbon Diaper.
Or double IPA.
Okay.
And I think something to add before we move forward is that we actually tried to step outside the box here. Most bourbon barrel aged beers are stouts and porters.
Right.
And we were trying to look for something that is not a stout or porter.
Yes.
Which
Yep.
is why we
And,
made the selections that we did.
Yeah. So, and we're trying to focus a little bit more on beers that are a little bit more accessible. So we have the Blue Mountain, which is very readily accessible, but unfortunately the Hardywood is not that accessible. In fact, they're completely out. This is one of the last couple bottles. So sorry about that. But the Blue Mountain is still up for opening. So starting off with the Blue Mountain, which is out of
Nelson County,
Virginia, Afton specifically.
Not too far outside of UVA, right
Right.
around that area. So if you're UVA, it's very accessible.
Yep.
Yeah, and they just started this whole bourbon barrel series officially. They had a bunch of beers that were they had barrel aged and then.
Well, they did them as seasonals, and what they did was they had them as seasonal beers, and then they were working as they were a brew pub, and then they realized that they were making lots of money and doing very well, and everybody liked their beers, so they would open up a barrel house and then make those seasonals beers now year round. And I know they have Mandolin, they have Dark Hollow, they have
Original Species,
yeah.
Uber Pills, Weizen,
Isabel, and many others.
They have
But
a lot.
Yeah.
So this, like I said, is their Belgian style golden ale. It says it's made from actually one malt, which that sounds kind of interesting. You know, it's great to see that you really can make a beer really simplistically, just one malt, couple of hops.
What can you say? As long as you have water from the oldest some of the oldest mountains in the world, as they say on the bottle. And quite frankly, that makes me kind of excited to try it.
Well, and I think that's what's kind of neat about the Blue Mountain series when they do with their barrel house beers. They try to have like concept beers. Mm-hmm. So with this one, clearly they're going with a certain direction. You know, they're trying to do something that just one certain ingredient that they're focusing on.
Right. And so, I mean, this is definitely going to be an extremely complex beer. They're using a Belgian yeast strain, which in and of itself is like it's going to impart a lot of crazy characteristic to it.
Perfect color.
Fruitiness.
I mean, the perfect like light yellow, almost caramelly color.
Yeah,
just a little bit. It looks gorgeous.
Yeah, you can definitely tell this is. I mean, a lot of the color characteristic is probably from the actual bourbon barrel itself, especially if it's only one malt. You're not going to get a lot of color depending on what malt you're using, considering it's probably a base like 2-row, 6-row.
And you said this is Belgian Golden going into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of going into the beer itself, I'm looking for what's the competition going to be between that Belgian yeast flavor that we're very familiar with,
right,
versus that barrel aging and how that's going to compete or complement. You know,
right.
Is one going to be dominant over the other, or is there going to be a new flavor that comes through?
Yeah, so this should be a kind of a symphony if it's played out right. So I'm actually looking forward to this a lot. We actually just got this up in New York, but I haven't gotten around to actually trying any of it. So except for Dark Hollow, which
Dark Hollow is awesome. Mm-hmm. I love Dark Hollow. I actually have the utmost respect for the brewery. So
best
I'm
bang for
really,
your buck. If you're going for a stout bourbon barrel aged, buy it.
Well, gents, are you ready?
Cheers, gents.
Cheers.
I haven't even smelled it yet.
A little bourbon on the nose. But
just
also
a smidge though, not that much.
But the Belgian comes through there too.
I get a lot of that Belgian yeast characteristic, that kind of tropical fruitiness, just a little bit of spice.
I don't get any bourbon on taste. Like maybe just a little hint, just right as I swallow. but that's about it.
Maybe a dash of vanilla in there.
Yeah, I guess
I
I
can
mean,
taste the
vanilla.
vanilla. I do get the vanilla.
It's not what we necessarily associate with bourbon
No,
itself,
not at all.
but a flavor that comes from the bourbon. I can taste a tad bit of vanilla coming through there, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a Belgian golden ale with some compliments.
Just
from-
happens to have
Yeah.
been
And you kind of,
aged.
I kind of get at the tail end, you get that oaky kind of tannin.
See, that's exactly what I was
characteristic to it.
talking about. It has the whiskey characteristic, the bourbon characteristic,
Yeah.
right at the very end. But like all throughout, like it doesn't have any of like the heat or any burn that you can get from a much stronger.
No, it's
bourbon
actually
barrel.
really, really smooth.
Yeah, it's surprisingly
It's
smooth.
very pleasant. Like,
Yeah, like this is And now it's time for the Hardywood Dipper.
that dipper.
The Dipper.
the diaper.
The
The
diaper.
diaper.
A bourbon diaper. Whatever. We need to throw that in there
Yeah.
for the bourbon.
So, I mean, this one actually, from what I understand, has kind of a funny story.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'll-
Hardywood.
We've
is-
missed this because we've
All right.
been gone.
So Hardywood is out of Richmond, Virginia. Only Richmond, Virginia. You can't get it anywhere else because, well, they're can't even keep up with the production. Of,
Sorry, everyone else
Yeah.
in the world.
They can't keep up with Richmond, Virginia's demand for Hardywood Park Craft Brewery. So they have a Hardywood single, and then they've been doing different types of IPAs. And what happened was they accidentally put their Belgian yeast for their Hardywood single into their IPA, and it turned out really good. And they actually admitted their mistake, sold it to the public, they loved it, and they said, hey, we got this really great beer, let's put it in bourbon barrels and see what happens. And thus was born the Barrel Series DIPA.
I actually
Right.
even think it was Virginia-like bourbon barrels because I think it
Yeah,
was
it's
like,
Abe Bowman, which
That's
is out
it,
of,
yeah.
which is out of Loudoun County, which is the northern part of Virginia.
which is weird because I thought bourbon had to come from Bourbon County.
Yeah, I mean,
It's weird,
a
blah, blah, blah.
technicality. It's not actually bourbon, but yeah, it's for
yeah, it's
for
something
all
like
te-
it's negligible. Ignore
yeah,
it.
for all
whatever.
intents and
It's the
purposes,
same
this is
thing.
a bourbon barrel. It's Virginia style bourbon, so it's not bourbon, but it is made
Virginia style
to,
bourbon.
Right.
Let's get down to brass tacks.
It's made to style. They have the half char white oak American barrels. They age it in 50 gallon barrels. So they do everything that you're expected. 3 years in a barrel minimum, all that. So it's essentially the same exact thing. 50% corn mash, all that. It's essentially the same thing. The only thing is it's not made in Bourbon County.
And
So-
just as backstory for Hardywood, their whole mantra is partnering with
Right.
local folks.
Well-
and in this case, they got their barrels from
or
Virginia.
as they like to call it, it's terroir.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
is actually a wine term for sourcing locally and how the local things can kind of influence everything. So they like to source everything as close to home as possible and do it that way. So obviously the bourbon barrels are Virginian. So
And honestly,
Follow that.
speaking of local, we're hoping to have him on the show in a few weeks. We've talked to him, and it looks like, yeah, they're actually completely willing to do something with us, which
Yeah.
we think would be awesome, considering they're like one of the really like premier up and coming breweries right now. So I'm really excited for that.
yeah, we'll probably splice that into like an episode we already have, like a Brooklyn episode, to kind of keep it.
And going along with
Keep
what
it-
we're trying to aim for here. So we are looking to do barrel-aged beers that are not stouts. And so in
Right.
this case, we now have an IPA that is also done with Belgian yeast that is also put into bourbon barrels. So we're looking
It's
at a
complex.
lot. Yeah, looking at a lot of different flavors here. So we're looking at the hops. We're looking at the Belgian yeast. What does that impart on it? And
Yep.
then how much of a factor is the
Bourbon
barrel aging,
aging.
the bourbon
Yeah, yeah.
specifically the bourbon? How much does that come into it? Are we tasting the bourbon bomb? Are we tasting lots of the
Yeah.
Belgian coming in?
really
that sort of thing.
Because see,
Yeah,
here's the
it's
thing:
really cloudy.
it's also 9%. This
Yeah.
is the exact same as that, but I'm expecting a lot of heat off of this. I'm expecting a lot more heat.
On the same token, though, it's 80 IBUs in comparison.
Oh, but that's because it's an IPA too.
Yeah,
Remember,
and
we're
which is
comparing
what you're ex-
almost two completely different styles
right.
of beer. They just both happen to be slapped into barrels.
Yeah, typically you don't do an IPA in
Right.
bourbon barrels. So
Yes.
it's,
I mean, like-
just two different flavors. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, they
cheers.
already did the hopper, which
Cheers.
is wood age,
a
so
little bit
it's
of a
kind of a
caramel
change.
color here.
It's a little cloudy. It's actually really fruity. You kind of get that citrusy characteristic like I'm very familiar with from the Centennial. because I love
There's
Centennial.
definitely a whiskey smell to it.
Yeah,
I mean,
this
like,
one smells like this could be a shot of whiskey. Not a full-on shot, but it has that there.
kind of a sweetness to it, like
Mhm. It's definitely the hop. Ooh. You know, that's not as bad as bourbony as I expected. You
No,
kind of,
not at all.
You kind of, when you were talking about it, you led me to believe that it was a lot more bourbon
Like it was a
characteristic.
punch of bourbon in the face.
Yeah, it's like poof, so much bourbon, but
Nope, not
I
at
think
all.
it's actually really well balanced.
It's super balanced. That was actually what I was about to say.
Yeah, like I get like an initial flavor of bourbon, that a little bit of heat that kind of hits and dissipates, and then comes back at the end. But what I taste is a very like fruity, caramely IPA.
But you can taste that char and that vanilla just kind of like coats your tongue.
Yeah,
And
it
like,
kind of it's actually still sitting on my tongue right now.
backstory, they didn't have any more bottles of this in the brewery.
Yeah.
So when I went to pick it up tonight with Morgan's Visit, they gave me a pint of it for free because they're that awesome. And I drank it and enjoyed it very much, and then brought the bottle that I had from when I helped them bottle this.
Which I appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah, it's something that honestly Morgan and I almost basically missed because of
Yeah.
our time in Brooklyn. I would honestly like to thank what I guess is our special guest this time, Morgan, because it's kind of down to Jonathan and I at this
Yeah.
point.
I
Our
mean-
plan is to keep having some guests, and there will be some episodes Morgan will be filming out of New
We'll
York.
get some New York episodes. We'll get some Richmond episodes. We're gonna mix it up a lot.
But as of right now, kids, cheers.
Yeah.
Have a great evening.
And remember, wherever there's good beer,
There's good people.
damn right.
Cheers, guys.